What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by no co-host. Once again, Alex busy today, so it is just me. If you tuned into yesterday's episode, I started doing this series where I'm going to be recapping the post-free agency for the New York Giants, taking a look on what they've done and where that has them now. So yesterday, I discussed the Giants' post-free agency salary cap space, talked about how they need to make some moves to clear up some cap space because they don't have enough money to pay their upcoming rookie draft class from the 2025 NFL Draft. Today, I want to recap the moves that the Giants didn't make in free agency. Now, obviously, we feel really great about the moves that the Giants did make. I've praised the Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson signings. I really like the Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo signings. More on those two later this week. Alex and I have a great video planned to discuss the two of them in particular detail. But what about the other areas of weaknesses that the Giants either just didn't have enough money to address or didn't prioritize addressing through free agency? That's essentially what I'm going to break down in today's episode, looking at the three top weaknesses that the Giants still have remaining on their roster and in their lineups post free agency. And when I dive into this, I think it's going to be a little bit eye-opening because it's going to help you realize this is where the Giants are moving for the upcoming draft. This is what they plan on addressing with their many draft picks that they have. Of course, they have their first round draft pick, 3rd overall. They have their second round draft pick, number 34 overall. They have the number 65 pick in the 3rd round and the number 99 pick in the 3rd round. That's 5 top 100 draft picks right there. Very crucial to have that many selections. Or is that 4? That's 4 top 100 draft picks right there. Somebody called me out in a recent episode for not being good at math. You're 100% right. I own up to that. But moving outside of the top 100, they also have a 4th round pick, and they have 2 additional 7th round picks. So the Giants have a lot of draft capital. They have a lot of needs still left over after free agency. And what I'm going to do in this episode is talk about their 3 biggest needs and then try to match up a few prospects who could help them fill each of those 3 needs at different rounds of the NFL draft. So that's the plan for today's episode. We're going to go ahead and dive right in with the number 1 need that I think the Giants still have on their roster, and that is the interior of their offensive line. You could boil this down to just being right guard. You could boil this down to being guards, because both positions could probably use more depth at the very least. But I'm going to go just the full interior of the offensive line being a top weakness for the New York Giants. The reason being, yes, they brought back Greg Van Roten on a 1-year contract, and I do really like him as a depth piece at right guard. Plus, he's got the versatility to fill in at center and left guard if need be due to injuries. However, I don't think that Greg Van Roten should have been re-signed as the starter. I think the Giants should have worked a little bit harder to find the starting talent. And I'll say, to their credit, they tried. They were deep in negotiations with Will Fries of the Indianapolis Colts before he signed a mega million contract with the Minnesota Vikings. So they did try to sign a right guard. It just didn't work out. They pivoted in a new direction, which was Javon Holland. But ultimately, they did end up just signing Greg Van Roten and re-signing Aaron Stinney as well. Those were the moves that they made at guard, and I was hoping to see a little bit more get done at that position. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but that tells you, moving forward into this upcoming NFL draft, you can probably expect to see the New York Giants take a guard at some point in these 7 rounds. Now, who could that guard be? Well, I'll go ahead, pull up the PFF big board, and discuss some of the names that I do like. And one of them that really does stand out to me is Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. He's a 6'6", 320-pound player. He's got a chance to be a starting player at the NFL level. All of his snaps across his collegiate career came at right guard. So this is a guy who probably doesn't start day 1 for you. He's ranked, 91 on the Giants big board. So this would be a target late in the 3rd round. The Giants do have the number 99 overall pick. So there's a good chance that Tate Ratledge falls into their lap there. If the Giants decide to go guard in the 3rd round, I think Ratledge makes sense as a great pass blocking, technical guard who does have some power in the running game and a lot of experience starting games at the position of need for the New York Giants, which is right guard. I think you could envision a scenario where, yes, Greg Van Roten starts the year as the starting right guard, but if he does get injured at any point, or if there's injury at another area on the offensive line and he needs to move to that section of the offensive line, let's say center, John Michael Schmitz misses some games, Greg Van Roten's there, then I think Ratledge gets his opportunity as a rookie to see some playing time. but I do view Ratledge as more of a developmental prospect that the Giants would be able to draft now and not necessarily rush into the starting lineup, which I think is crucial. I don't want to see the third round, number 99 overall pick necessarily starting 1,000 snaps this season. If Tate Ratledge gets on the field for 300 snaps this season, that's a success to me. I'd like to see him be a target for the Giants in the third round as a potential long-term succession plan behind the stopgap guard that is Greg Van Roten. Another player that I think is intriguing is Willie Lampkin. The thing with Willie Lampkin, undersized is an understatement. He's 5'11", 290 pounds. I don't know if he can actually succeed at the NFL level at that height and weight. But he does have some of the best film in this draft class, not just according to me, but also according to experts. I think it was Lance Zierlein of NFL.com said that he has the best run blocking film of any guard in this draft class. And I've taken a look at his film. I tend to agree. He is an absolute technician and powerful man in the running game, but he was doing that on UNC's offensive line versus subpar competition at a very undersized stature. Can he do that at the next level? I'm not entirely sure. This is a day 3 prospect to me, somebody that the Giants could target in round 4 or later, depending on where he falls, because of his size. If he was a 6'3", 330-pound guard, he'd probably be a top 100 pick, but he's not. He has the film. He's proven it at the collegiate level. I don't know if his size would hold up. There's actually conversation from some draft analysts. You might draft him to play guard. If he doesn't work there, you try him at center. And if he doesn't work there, you hope that he could be an athletic, mauling fullback. So the Giants could draft Willie Lampkin and hope that his game translates, but his undersizement might cause him to move positions at the next level. So you have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of risk with the selection in UNC guard Willie Lampkin. But also keep in mind, Joe Schoen likes his UNC offensive linemen. Josh Azidu and Marcus McKethan both taken in that 2023 NFL draft. So maybe there is a chance that Willie Lampkin could be on their draft board. So those are a couple of names that I think to keep an eye on in that top 100 to 150 pick range. I think that they could potentially be prospects on the board to keep an eye on. Tyler Booker as well out of Alabama. I think that he is an interesting prospect. He's very much a physical traits prospect. Not a lot of technical development necessarily done on him yet, but he is ranked in the top 50 on PFF's board. So you tend to think that could be a late second, early third round draft pick, depending on where he falls. Maybe he's somebody to keep an eye on for the Giants. I'm not entirely crazy about what I've watched from him in his game film just yet, but I will just put Tyler Booker out there as a name to keep in mind. So also on the interior offensive line is the center position. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because while we did invest a second round pick in John Michael Schmitz, and I still do have confidence he's going to be a good player, my confidence doesn't necessarily mean he will be a good player. It's just confidence, but it's not foolproof. I think that there is a lot of concern for John Michael Schmitz. He's been wildly inconsistent through the first couple seasons of his career, and he's oftentimes been injured. And because of that, I'm not saying that the Giants need to draft over him and take a center in the top 3 rounds, but could they take one on day 3 as a developmental pick who maybe eventually becomes a starter if John Michael Schmitz doesn't pan out? Yeah, I think you can bet on them doing something like that, and I think it would be wise for them to, just to hedge the bet here on John Michael Schmitz. I think what really John Michael Schmitz needs to be successful, stability at quarterback, which the Giants should have with Russell Wilson, and stability across the offensive line, which hopefully they have, but that's really just reliant on being healthy at left tackle, left guard, and right tackle. That's really not up to John Michael Schmitz. I think a lot of the injuries he suffered have been a result of overcompensating due to players around him playing poorly due to injuries. So this line staying healthy is crucial to its success. But I also think for John Michael Schmitz, again, I think there's some prospects. Seth McLaughlin out of Ohio State is like a late day 3 pick. Jared Wilson out of Georgia is an early day 3 pick who PFF projects to be a starting level center. He's a guy that you can keep an eye on. But I think generally speaking with JMS, the reason why I project he will take a major step this year is because I think a lot of his issues last year were related to the fact that the quarterbacks that the Giants had on their center were not able to read defenses well, could not call protections themselves, and therefore I think a lot of that burden was shouldered by a very inexperienced and young center in John Michael Schmitz. Having Russell Wilson back there to call those protections, recognize, hey, there's a blitzer coming here from the defense. Hey, the defensive line is shifted this way. This is where the rush is going. A center being asked to do all of that at such a young an inexperienced age at the NFL level, very tall task. But Russell Wilson doing all that and taking some of that responsibility off his shoulders should allow JMS to just stand there and block. Just focus on your assignment, get your man, let Russell Wilson figure the rest out pre-snap. You just do what you got to do post-snap. So I actually do think John Michael Schmitz is going to have a big jump forward this year. But then again, injuries are a problem. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Giants take a shot on a developmental center late in this draft. But yes, to me, the number one need still left on the Giants roster is the interior of the offensive line. Now, number two, let's flip it over to the trenches, interior defensive line. That, to me, is the second biggest need on the Giants roster following free agency. These are the two positions that we all as Giants fans expected them to address with a big contract, and that just never came to fruition. Whether their fault or not, I don't think it was. It just didn't happen for them. Currently, the Giants' interior defensive line is projected to be Dexter Lawrence at nose tackle, of course, maintaining his role. Roy Robertson Harris alongside him. That is the player that the New York Giants signed in free agency. And obviously, Raheem Nunez-Roches is returning. And then Chauncey Golston, who the Giants signed from the Cowboys, is an edge rusher who has the ability to move on the interior. So I think you'll see him, Robertson Harrison, or whatever his name is, and Nunez-Roches. Those three will rotate on those two other interior defensive line spots alongside Dexter Lawrence, unless the Giants draft a defensive lineman, which I think you can almost bet will happen early in this draft, because this is a draft class chock full of defensive line talent. Daniel Jeremiah said he has 24 starting level grades in this draft class at the defensive line position alone. That is incredible. I think that's more than double what he had last year, according to him. And by all accounts, from every draft source and analyst, and if you just turn on some film or some highlights, whatever you want, and you take a look at the defensive linemen in this class, there is a lot of talent. Giants do need to take advantage of the amount of defensive line talent in this 2025 NFL draft class. Who could they target? Well, let's go over some names. Obviously, Mason Graham has been brought up a lot. He's going to be a top 10 pick. If the Giants do trade down, yes, keep an eye on Mason Graham being their selection. If they trade down further, some guys who could be in the first round, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss is a very polished interior defender, very physically gifted. He could be interesting. But more realistically, I think the Giants will probably target a defensive lineman in round 2 if they keep that pick and if they're able to get whatever they want in the first round without trading down. So, the guys who could be available there at the top of the second round include Derek Harmon out of Oregon, Darius Alexander out of Toledo, TJ Sanders out of South Carolina, Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State, who, yes, we did discuss on this channel. We've discussed him actually several times. I'm a huge fan of Tyleik Williams. I think he is the perfect fit for what the New York Giants want. 6'3", 327 pounds, hell of a run defender, a lot of upside as a pass rusher. He is who I want the New York Giants to draft on day 2. I will throw out there, he did suffer some sort of injury at his pro day. I'm not sure how significant or serious the injury was, to be determined, but if he is ready to go and can start in week 1 as a rookie, not going to miss time, he should absolutely be high on the Giants draft board entering day 2 of this draft. Some other prospects include Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M as a day 2 pick, Alfred Collins out of Texas. I really like him as just a stout run defender. And I like Jordan Phillips out of Maryland as well. And also one other player that I'll throw out there that I do really like as a pass rusher from the interior. This is more of a day 2/day 3 pick. Aeneas Peebles out of Virginia Tech. I know the name is probably, let's be civil in the comments, but Aeneas Peebles is a fun prospect with a lot of pass rushing upside. So, those are all of the interior defenders that I think the Giants could be targeting in those first 2 to 4 rounds of the NFL draft. Again, I think it's very likely they attack this position early, take one of those top guys off the board with the number 34 overall pick, and I like Darius Alexander, Derek Harmon, TJ Sanders. I really like Tyleik Williams. All of those guys are projected to go somewhere in that 25 to 35 range, maybe a little bit more higher, maybe a little bit lower, just depends on how the draft board falls, but one of those guys will definitely be available. At least one of those guys will be available for the Giants at 34. I think there's a great chance that they do take an interior defensive lineman with the number 34 overall pick. That, to me, is the number 2 biggest need that the Giants still have remaining post-free agency. Now, The number 3 need that I think the Giants have to address in the draft, or number 3 weakness that they have here on their roster, this is going to be a little bit of a broad term that I'm going to use, but it's offensive playmaker. And the reason I'm going to use that term is because, as we've been discussing recently on the channel, Alex and I have, if you look at all of the top offenses in the NFL, you either see 2 WR1s, right? Like a 1A, 1B situation. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown. That's a WR1 and 1A and 1B, basically. However, some of these other offenses do it a little bit differently. They've got a 1A, 1B, but hey, 1A is Travis Kelce, 1B is Xavier Worthy / Rashee Rice when he was healthy. Or, if you want to look at some other offenses, how about for the Baltimore Ravens? 1A was Derrick Henry, 1B was Mark Andrews / Zay Flowers / also Lamar Jackson. The point being here, the Giants only have one legitimate superstar playmaker, Malik Nabers. They need to get another dynamic and explosive playmaker, whether that be Travis Hunter with the number 3 overall pick, whether that be a guy like Trey Harris in round 3 if they think he's got that kind of upside, or if that's an explosive running back prospect somewhere in the middle rounds of this draft to pair with Tyrone Tracy. The Giants need another elite playmaker, in my opinion. If you look at all the best teams in the NFL, all of the best offenses, none of them have only one playmaker. They all have several. So I think it's important for the Giants to add another star. And I know stars are kind of hard to find in the NFL draft. The draft absolutely is a crapshoot. And maybe that's why the Giants might lean towards taking Travis Hunter at number 3 overall, because he is probably an immediate impact star playmaker. But if they don't take him, maybe they take a quarterback. Still feel like that's a need long term. They take Shedeur Sanders at 3. I do think in these first 3 rounds, it needs to be a priority. They have to add some playmaking talent on offense. And I understand that the Giants feel like a quarterback is going to elevate this offense. Nabers will play better. Slayton will play better. Wan'Dale Robinson will play better. Theo Johnson will play better. It's just about the quarterback. What if it's not just about the quarterback? What if they still need more playmaking talent? In my opinion, they do. The only move that they made on offense in free agency was re-signing Darius Slayton outside of their work at the quarterback position, which again, I commend, but the only move in the playmaking department that they made was re-signing Darius Slayton. That is not enough. Rolling into 2025 with the same playmaking department that you had in 2024 when you finished 31st in the NFL in points per game is an accident waiting to happen. So what the New York Giants need to do in this draft, get a playmaker. It is of the utmost importance. I believe in Russell Wilson to maximize a playmaker. He didn't play with a lot of playmakers last year. Najee Harris's career-long run is like under 40, 50 yards. He's not a playmaker in that regard. Yes, he had George Pickens. He maximized George Pickens when he was on the field. George Pickens got hurt down the stretch. That significantly hurt Russell Wilson's numbers. Russell Wilson can maximize a playmaker, but if you give him several, he can really hit those deep balls and open up that offense. So if the Giants feel like Jalen Hyatt's going to take this big step, maybe that's possible, but just widely speaking, the Giants do need more playmaking talent on this offense. They didn't have enough last year, especially when some injuries happened. Going into 2025, you have to add more playmakers. So that's the bottom line. That's why I think you're going to see the Giants definitely spend a top 100 pick, I would think, on a playmaking talent on the offensive side of the ball in this year's draft. So before I wrap this up, if you can't hear, there's a major thunderstorm going on outside, so I'm trying to finish this before I lose power. But some of the names that I think you could keep an eye on. In the second round, I like Jack Beck out of TCU. He won the Senior Bowl MVP, a very good player who has ties to actually Louisiana and LSU through family, and I think that he is friends with Malik Nabers from what I understand. Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, who we've discussed on this channel that we really like, very explosive route runner. Xavier Restrepo out of Miami, slot receiver, probably not the best fit because the Giants do have Wan'Dale Robinson, but reminder, Wan'Dale's entering the final year of his contract, so a guy like Restrepo might make sense as a long-term play here. Trey Harris, who we've mentioned, once again has a connection to Nabers, was his quarterback in high school, but also just had a dominant year this past season at Ole Miss as wide receiver. And once you get later in the draft, guys like Tez Johnson as a speedster out of Oregon, Isaiah Bond as a speedster out of Texas. There are a lot of interesting prospects later in this draft as well, but again, I expect the Giants to take one of these receivers in the first 3 rounds. And then as a bonus here, running backs I think are interesting for the Giants. You've got guys who could be available like Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, speedster for sure. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa is one I think you should keep an eye on. If I'm not mistaken, the Giants hired Iowa's running backs coach as their own running backs coach this offseason, so that connection could be interesting. Maybe Caleb Johnson's high on their board. Travion Henderson out of Ohio State is an explosive prospect. R.J. Harvey out of UCF is actually a really interesting prospect with a lot of explosive ability, a lot of forced missed tackles, a really interesting guy there. And obviously I've mentioned him several times, but Trevor Etienne out of Georgia on day 3 of the draft, I think is one of the steals of this draft class. He's one of my guys personally. I love his game film. I've watched a lot of all 22 on him. I think he's a player that the Giants should keep an eye on going into day 3 of the NFL draft. So that's the running back position and the wide receiver position and some players to target there. Tight end, I truthfully haven't dug into this draft class a whole lot just yet, but I'm going to throw that one out there as a bonus. Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. I know that the Giants have Theo Johnson, but hey, a lot of great offenses have 2 tight ends and love to run 12 personnel. In fact, Brian Dable does like to run 12 personnel, but hasn't had the personnel afforded to him with kind of their lack of depth at tight end. Elijah Arroyo out of Miami is a great route runner, very athletic tight end, and the Giants did send their tight ends coach to Miami's pro day, which I thought was interesting. Everybody said, hey, they sent the whole contingency to scout Cam Ward. Nobody pointed out their tight ends coach was there too, and so was Elijah Arroyo. So keep an eye on him. Day 2 of the draft, maybe the Giants take a chance on Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. But that's pretty much going to wrap this up. Those are my top 3 biggest weaknesses post-free agency for the New York Giants. What do you think their biggest weaknesses are? Obviously, there's a few that I didn't really dive into. I still think they're unproven and need more depth at cornerback. I still think they're unproven and need more depth at quarterback because behind Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, yes, they've got Tommy DeVito, and you guys know I love Tommy DeVito, Forza Italia, Forza Napoli, but I still think that the New York Giants are going to target a quarterback in this draft. Maybe it's at 3 and it's Shador. Maybe it's later and it's more developmental. They will get a quarterback at some point, though, because that is a long-term need. But again, that pretty much wraps up all of the different weaknesses that I see on this team now about a month away from the NFL draft and post-free agency. Let me know your thoughts on it. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.